Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Calverwell. I'll be the one conducting the FM202 exam online tutorials. Just to get some heads up from you guys, are you in a position to hear me loud and clear wherever you are? Can you hear me loud and clear wherever you are? Oh, great stuff. Oh, great, guys. So I'll be the one taking you guys for this FM202 exam online. And if ever you have got a question, just let me know. I'll be in a position to help you out. So just a few pointers that I would give you guys as you prepare yourselves for this final exam. One should ensure that you have covered all the learning outcomes as per your learner guide. It is so important to cover all your learning outcomes as per your learner guide. Secondly, you should use practical questions from past examination papers. Remember, reading through or going through some of the concepts in the learner guide, sometimes it is also very important to actually look at practical questions. Remember, Financial Management 202 is more practical than not. So you need to go through past examination papers. We have got 3 past examination papers that are on your e-learn. They also have got guidelines. So my advice is go through the past examination papers first, and then you can always confirm your calculations using the guidelines. But don't use the guidelines for preparation of your exam. Revision study groups, so important. You guys are doing tertiary education. Most of you could be working. I would advise, if ever possible, get yourself into study groups. As you read and also engage your colleagues, you'll be in a position also to learn some specific concepts and also help each other in those groups. You should revise your assignment. I wouldn't want to reiterate more on that. You cannot imagine if a specific question that was in the assignment end up coming also in the exam, you drag yourself. So I suggest you also go through your assignment. The guidelines of the assignments are already there on the e-learn, so you need to engage that. And then the use of financial calculator, so important in Financial Management FM202. The reason being, yes, you can still use your scientific calculator, but you might never be able to finish this exam. So an exam of FM2, not only does it want you, or not only is it examining you on knowledge content, but it's also examining you on speed and also on accuracy. So I would advise you strongly to start to use the financial calculator. Okay, that being said, I'll quickly go through these one more time right at the end, but then let's quickly have a look at Learning Unit 4 onwards. To those that haven't gone through Learning Unit 1, 2, and 3, remember those? We went through those learning units when I was preparing you guys for the assignment. I'll right at the end do a quick overview of them. You can always go to eLearn, get our podcast from there of the first presentation that I did covering Learning Unit 1, 2, and 3. That said, Learning Unit 4 now. It is short-term financial decisions. I'll speak around some of the most important elements or outcomes on this topic. The first one is managing elements of working capital management. Working capital, it is calculated as current assets minus your current liabilities. And the most important elements under your current assets are these 3. It is cash, it is your inventory, and also your trade receivables or your accounts receivables. Those are your 3 main elements under your current assets. And then subtract your current liabilities. The most important one there are your creditors or your accounts payables. So we're going to discuss how one can actually manage net working capital by focusing on those 3. It is also expected of you to be able to calculate and interpret a cash conversion cycle and your operating cycle. Your cash conversion cycle, the formula, it will be given in your exam. It is the average age of inventory plus your average collection period minus your average payment period. What cash conversion cycle mean is how long are we having our cash being tied up? That's what cash conversion cycle is. So as one manages net working capital, you need to have your cash conversion cycle as short as possible because you wouldn't want to be tying up a lot of cash in accounts receivables or in inventory, because me and you know we've got a cost which we call opportunity cost. The more money you have being tied up which you cannot access because of the concept of time value of money, one way or another you'll be losing money or opportunity cost in actual fact. And then calculate the effects of tightening or relaxing credit standards. This often comes in the exam. So when you're calculating the effects of tightening and relaxing credit standards, it is important to note that whenever you're tightening credit standards, you are reducing the credit period. For instance, if I've got credit terms that says 5/10 net 45, what such credit terms mean is you get yourself a 5% discount if you pay within 10 days, failure of which the invoice still need to be settled within 45 days. So when you are relaxing credit standard, it means you are going to increase the 45 days, let's say, to 60. But when you tighten in credit standards, you'll be moving from 45 days, maybe coming down to 30 days. You need to see the effects, so there will be four important components there. The first one being, what will be the effect when we tighten credit standards? So when you tighten in credit standards, in short, you are, instead of you increasing the credit period, you're actually decreasing it. You are not widening the net anymore, meaning you won't be selling as much sales one would have done when the credit terms were more relaxed. So we'll be expecting sales revenue to fall down or to decrease. When sales revenue decreased, of course, the gross profit that one would actually make when you're selling less volume would actually decrease as well. We also have a look at your marginal investment in trade receivables. Like I said, the more money you have being tied up for longer periods, the more one would actually be incurring more opportunity cost. So you would need to have a shorter period at which your accounts receivables are owing you. So that will be your marginal investment in trade receivables. The third one will be the issue of marginal bad debts or credit losses. If you are relaxing credit standards, one should expect your credit losses also to increase because you are widening the net as you're actually doing the fishing. And me and you would know, the more relaxed credit standards are, if it is a net, the more chances of one catching frogs instead of fish. Hence, we end up having more customers that will be defaulting. And then finally, you also might want to look at the effect of relaxing or tightening credit standards pertaining cash discounts. So those are the main four categories that one would have to look at when you are going through relaxing and tightening credit standards. In your textbook, there is a typical example that is in your textbook pertaining relaxing and tightening credit standards. So I would advise you guys to go through an example on page 441. Example 441, which is on chapter 14, working capital management. Don't get in the exam without going through that example. It's well explained. We'll be looking at those four effects whenever one tightens or relaxes credit standards. And then also discussing the concept of creditors management. On the concept of credit management, I would want you to look at two important things there. The first one being, is it cheaper for you to borrow from the bank, or should you actually go and buy on credit? So what one needs to do is, the cost of borrowing from the bank, they would actually give you a percentage already. You don't have to calculate that. But then, the cost of buying on credit, it is the opportunity cost of one foregoing the credit option, the cash discount option. So what you then do is you need to calculate your cost of buying on credit, which is calculated using the formula CD over 100 subtract CD times 365 over N. And I often see students failing to interpret the N on that formula. It's CD over 100 subtract CD times 365 over N. So the N, it is the number of days after which the cash discount period is expired up until the invoice is still supposed to be paid. So if I can give an example there, let's say I've got a credit standard that says 5/10 net 45. It goes without saying, if you pay within 10 days, you get yourself a 5% cash discount, failure of which the invoice still need to be paid within 45 days. So your N in that regard, it will be 45 minus 10. It will be 45 minus 10, meaning 35. And your CD on the formula just I spoke of now, it will be the 5%. So on your calculation now, when you're manually doing this calculation, instead of you using CD as a percentage, just put the absolute figure exactly as E, as 5. So you would say 5 divided by 100, subtract 5 times 365 over your 35. So I want to emphasize on the N. Your N is number of days after the credit period, the cash discount period has expired, up until the time the invoice still need to be paid. So on the example I just gave, it will be 45 subtract 10, which will be 35. So that is basically your learning unit 4. So this is so important in an organization, because if you can't manage your day-to-day operations of a business, doesn't matter how good your future and your strategic direction or decisions that a company would have made, because you might not be seeing the future if you are failing to pay your short-term obligations as they are falling due. So we always require to have more current assets than the current liabilities, and we call that a company will be having a healthy liquidity position. So if you end up having current liabilities being more than your current asset, technically you will be insolvent, which in no time, if it's not handled with the level of emergence that is required, such a company would actually be closing down. So that's basically your learning unit 4. And I've got a typical learning unit 4 question here, which I took from October 2015 exam. I'll quickly read. It says this question consists of 4 separate parts. Part A. Question 4.1 say, why is liquidity in an organization so important? Liquidity is important in an organization because it talks around the ability of a company to be in a position to pay its short-term obligations as they are falling due. And it also helps an organization to keep your fixed assets or your non-current assets running efficiently, because you'll be having enough money. Instead of you trying to liquidate these fixed assets, you actually let them be, help you out to generate revenue or income as you run your operations. Question 4.2 then say, why is accounts receivable considered to be an investment? Remember the general interpretation of an investment. An investment, you will put away some money, let's say today, with the hope of getting a return in future. That's basically the concept of investment. Put away some money today with the hope of getting a positive return in future. In the same token, if you look at accounts receivables, the inventory that debtors will actually come and buy from us, we would have already bought that using our own financial resources. So we would have invested in our inventory. After investment in inventory, we will be hoping that when customers are going to pay in future, we'll also be getting a profit. Remember, no one, unless if you're a non-profit organization, would you sell your products at cost price. So we invest in the inventory at cost price with the hope of collecting our receivables in future at a profit, which basically becomes an investment. Part B now says, your boss is concerned about the high levels of receivables and bad debts. You then explain to him the possible effects of tightening the credit standards. I'll read that statement one more time. Your boss is concerned about the high levels of receivables and bad debts. You then explain to him the possible effects of tightening credit standards. So in this regard, we are tightening credit standards, meaning, or in credit terms, remember the credit term that I have read out, 5/10, net 45. What such credit term would mean is, if you pay within 10 days, you get yourself a 5% discount, fail of which you still need to settle the invoice in 45 days. So when you're tightening credit standards, you are reducing the number of days from 45, let's say, to 30 days. That said, I'll go and read the scenario again, and then I'll then sorry guys about that interruption. So I was explaining the concept of tightening credit standards. I'm back, guys. Can you hear me loud and clear? Sorry about that. Can you just give me a quick indication? Can you hear me, guys? If you are hearing me, can you kindly type so that I'll be in a position to move on? Oh, great stuff. Great. So I want to re-explain the concept of tightening credit standards, or great stuff, guys. So when you tighten credit standards, you are reducing the credit period at which invoices are supposed to be paid. For instance, if you've got a credit term that says 5/10 net 45, my credit period, it is the 45 days. The credit period, it is the 45 days. So if I reduce the 45 days to, let's say, a month, which is basically 30 days, I would have tightened credit standards. So that said, I'll read this scenario. I would want you to respond to A, B, C, D, and E. You're only going to respond by, is it going to be an increase or is it going to be a decrease? So I would want you to read the whole scenario one more time, and then you make an indication. Will A be an increase? Will it be a decrease? The same goes for B, C, D, and E. So I'll read the scenario one more time, and then you'll be able to respond to A, B, C, up until E. Your boss is concerned about the high levels of receivables and bad debts. You then explain to him the possible effects of tightening the credit standards. So when tightening credit standards, the theoretical effect will be that there would be a dash themselves, and that's a dash in net profits due to loss in customers. The cost of the marginal investment in accounts receivables will then dash due to the lower amounts of receivables. The cost of marginal bad debts should dash due to the lower risk profile of customers. Thus, the overall theoretical result should be a dash in profits. So I'll give you 2 minutes. Can you attempt to respond A to E? You're only going to make an indication of either an increase or a decrease. Of course, it can be both. I'll give you a quick 2 minutes. Can you apply your mind and then respond to this? Thank you. 2 minutes for you to respond, will this amount to an increase or a decrease? And then I'll be in a position to explain why an increase or why a decrease. Or maybe let's start by responding to A up until C. But rather, no, let's stick to the question from A to E, because they'll be linking and also having knock-on effects on the other components. So let's just respond to all of them from A to E. I can see there are 2 participants who just joined us now. We're talking around working capital management. So I've got a question there to say, when you are tightening credit standards, what will happen to sales? What will be the effect to net profit? What will also happen in investment in marginal trade receivables? What will be the effect on bad debts and the overall effect? So if you can kindly respond from A to E, you're only making an indication, either an increase or a decrease. I'm yet to see anyone typing. Rather, let's go through these one by one. What did you guys say on A? Let me see just an indication on how one would have responded to A. When you're tightening credit standards, what should happen to A? That's right. It has to amount to a decrease. Remember, when you're tightening credit standards, for some reason we are human beings and companies are being run by human beings. So when you are reducing the credit period from 45 days, for instance, to 30 days, other people then feel they're going to be pressured to be in a percent to settle these amounts. So other customers would actually choose not to actually buy on credit. So whenever you tighten credit standards, we expect the sales volume to decrease. So your A, it will be a decrease. Thus, a decrease in net profits due to the loss in customers. So your A and your B, they have to be decreased, because if I was making a profit of 20 Rand per sale, and the minute the volume decreases, it goes without saying I'll actually be also decreasing my potential net profit that one would have made. So your A and B are decreases. What can then happen to C? Sales volume has decreased. Yes, and B, net profits are going to decrease because I could have been making 20 Rand per product. The minute I end up selling less volume, it goes without saying my net profit will also decrease. What should happen to C? The cost of marginal investment in accounts receivables. An increase or decrease? That's right, present. It will amount or it will result in a decrease in investment in trade receivables. You know what trade receivables are? They are debtors. So the minute we end up reducing the credit period, since sales volume has already decreased, we would also be expecting the amount of money being tied up in accounts receivables also decreasing. So C will also be a decrease due to the lower amount of receivables, of course. The cost of marginal bad debts should. Then, due to the lower risk profile of customers, what then should happen to the cost of marginal bad debts? Yes, it will amount to a decrease, because remember, you have already reduced your sales volume. Your investment in trade receivables has decreased. It goes without saying you're also going to expect a decrease in marginal bad debts. The less you sell on credit, the less chances of you having some of your customers defaulting on their accounts. So the cost of marginal bad debts should also decrease due to the lower risk profile of those customers you eventually be able to sell to on credit. Thus, the overall theoretical result should be a dash in profits. What do you think will be the overall effect there? Okay, the overall effect, I'm sure I'm going to shock most of you there. The overall effect will be an increase. That's right, Monique, and Sheridan as well. It should be an increase because remember, when you are decreasing your bad debts, when you are decreasing your investment in trade receivables, the theoretical effects would be decrease, 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 but overall, we'll be expecting our net profits in actual fact to go up. So that's basically how one would have responded to this question. From A to D, we were going to have decreases, but the overall effect, the theoretical effect on profits was going to be an increase in actual fact. So that's basically how one would have responded to that. So of importance when you're going through learning unit 4, we want to be in a position to have enough liquid assets to settle or to pay our short-term obligations as they fall due. We would also would not want to keep a lot of current assets because remember, if you've got a lot of money in your current account, surely you should have actually invested such monies and earn a return elsewhere. So you just want to keep what is enough. And then, of course, me and you would then argue how enough is enough. Yes, it is a relative term, but you look at the type of a company and the business that a company will be conducting, and then you then be in a position to decide how much should we keep as inventory, what percentage of our total sales should be on credit, and then do we have enough cash to be in a position to pay our short-term obligations whenever they are falling due. So that is basically learning unit 4. I'll quickly do an overview of the outcomes. I said you need to know how one will manage the elements of working capital management, which are 4. Current assets have got cash. You will use a cash budget to manage your cash. Inventory, you'll be using your economic order quantity. You need to know how to calculate the economic order quantity in conjunction with the reorder point. We have got the just-in-time inventory system where you don't keep inventory, you only go and look for exactly what a specific customer would require. You have your ABC method, which is also mentioned in your learner guide, where you categorize your inventory according to the rand amount versus the sales volume. And then the last one would be your computerized system of managing inventory. And most companies are now using the robot system to say whenever you've got adequate inventory, you'll be having a green as a sign that you have got enough. The minute you're running out, you move on to amber. And then if the inventory levels are already very serious, it will then turn out to red, meaning you need to go and place an order. That's how you manage inventory. And your accounts receivables, you manage them we've got 2 methods there. Age analysis, where you look at what is the total amount of accounts receivables that are outstanding. And then you look at the time that they're supposed to be maturing. So you would need most of your of your trade receivables to be paid in the shortest period possible. So that's your age analysis. And then you can also look at your credit standards. Like the credit terms that we are speaking of. Should we relax credit standards? Should we tighten credit standards? And also have a look at your 5 C's that are comprehensively dealt with in your textbook that talks around character, collateral, conditions, capital, and so forth. You also need to have a look at that. And then calculate and interpret the cash conversion cycle. You will never write an exam without a question pertaining cash conversion cycle because it is so important in how a company would manage their working capital. It is calculated by saying average age of inventory, AAI, plus your average collection period, ACP, minus your average payment period. And then a follow-up question that often comes after that, after you've done your calculation, it will be, how can one improve the cash conversion cycle? And remember, the objective on the cash conversion cycle would need the period to be as short as possible, because we wouldn't want most of our financial assets being tied up in inventory or in accounts receivables. So you will be in a position to improve the cash conversion cycle by decreasing the average age of inventory, by also decreasing the average collection period, and then increasing your accounts payment period. So you can actually improve the cash conversion cycle by doing those three in actual fact. Decrease average age of inventory, also decrease the average collection period, but then increase your average payment period. And then I've already spoken about the effects of tightening credit standards. You need to go through the example I just mentioned on page 441 in your textbook. There is a good example there that shows how do you do these calculations and also the effects which we've just gone through now. Discuss the concept of creditors management. I said you make two decisions there. The first one, go calculate the cost of buying on credit, which is CD over 100, subtract CD times 365 over N, where your CD is your cash discount percentage, and your N is the number of days after which the cash discount period is expired up until the invoice is supposed to be paid. So that is basically your learning unit 4. Are there any questions on learning unit 4 before I'll be able to move on to learning unit 5? Any questions on learning unit 4 before we'll be in a position to move on to learning unit 5? Exam. Sorry guys, okay, I think I'm back now. I'm sorry I've lost you there. I'm back now. So I want you to quickly calculate that part. Okay, within a cash budget, it won't be examinable in this final exam. It would have actually been asked in the in the assignment instead. So don't worry yourself around the cash budget itself, because it consumes a lot of time, and it should be very unfair for one to actually ask cash budget in this exam. Okay, great stuff. So don't concern yourself with, you just need to know you will be in a position to manage your cash as an important element of your networking capital by preparing cash budgets. Remember, when you're preparing a cash budget, you are trying to forecast expected payments or expected receipts of cash in the future. So don't worry about the preparation, rather the understanding why would one prepare a cash budget. And the budget, remember, it is a forecast into the future. So you would want to know how one can actually best use their resources into the future instead of waiting for the future to happen to one. Can you kindly respond to part D? I just want the first part, question 4.5. RR is a major retail toy store. RR has got a credit policy to its customers of 60 days. However, customers on average settle their accounts in 45 days. RR has got an average period of 20 days. However, the creditors give 45 days only. RR inventory turnover is 30 days. Can you calculate the cash conversion cycle following through the concept I just explained now? Only question 4.5, and then we'll be in a position to move on. 4.6, I think I've already responded to that. Can you kindly calculate your cash conversion cycle on question 4.5? I'll also be doing the same, and then we'll be able to go through it together. How can one calculate cash conversion cycle looking at the information given there? So anyone who have finished that calculation, calculate your cash conversion cycle. So there is a formula on how to calculate your cash conversion cycle. Average age of inventory plus average collection period minus average payment period. So I've given you the formula. What is the cash conversion cycle of this company called RR? Anyone who have done that calculation? I would want this to be an engaging session because it's a practical module. It's not a theory heavy module, so we need to work through some of these things together. Let's see what you know, and then I'll be able to correct you. Not as such, Celine, it's not 35. I've got Monique typing, Terry and Monique. Terry is right, it's 65. You would have calculated exactly like what I've just done there. Your cash conversion cycle is average age of inventory plus your average collection period minus your average payment period. So in this regard, you are not going to use the credit terms, but rather exactly what was happening. So if you look here, it says RR is a major retail toy store. That's very right in table. RR has got a credit policy to its customers of 60 days. That's what the policy says. But however, customers on average are settling their accounts in 55 days. So you end up using the actuals. In this regard, the actual figures were by 55 days. So my average collection period were going to be 55 days instead of 60 days. RR has got an average payment period of 20 days. However, the creditors give what? 45 days. So as much as our creditors need us to settle our accounts in 45 days, on average, we are settling our accounts in 20 days. So you were supposed to use the actuals there, which was 20 days on the APP. And then RR inventory turnover is 30 days. So you're going to say average age of inventory 30 days plus your average collection period of 55 minus your average payment period of 20 days to get yourself 65 days. So in this circumstance, you use exactly what is happening. In a case where they don't tell you the averages, you end up using the credit terms exactly as they would have given you. Okay, so that is basically learning unit 4, guys. I'm seeing Terry typing. We'll see what he has to say there. So that is basically learning unit 4. I'll move on to learning unit 5. On your learning unit 5, one needs to discuss the different types of equity and debt finance. A quick example of equity, you could be looking at ordinary shares and also preference shares. Debt finance, it could be long-term loans, it could be your debentures and your bonds. You need to be able to calculate the cost of equity. When you're calculating the cost of equity, remember, like I said, equity is divided into two: ordinary share equity and also preference share equity. So on your ordinary share, we have got three concepts there. If the company is paying dividends, we use the dividend growth model. If the company is not paying dividends, we use the capital asset pricing model called CAPM, the one that says Rj is equal to Rf minus beta, open brackets, Rm subtract Rf. That's what we refer to as your CAPM. So we've got two scenarios. It's either a company is paying dividends that are not growing, you use the dividend valuation model. But if a company is paying dividends, but the dividends are growing, you use the dividend growth model. But if a company is not even paying dividends at all, you then use the CAPM. They will give you these formulas, so you need to pay attention as you read. Find out, is this company paying dividends? Yes. Are they growing? No. Dividend valuation model. If they are growing, yes. Dividend growth model. If that company is not even paying dividends towards ordinary shares, you then use the capital asset pricing model. So right at the back of your exam paper, there will be a formula sheet. Those formulas will actually be on a table. You need to know under this circumstance which one to use. Calculate the after-tax cost of debt. Remember, debt, interest. It is not interest. So calculate the after-tax cost of debt. We always calculate the cost of debt being after tax, because tax is a tax-deductible expense, which is completely different when one is actually calculating cost of equity, where you know your dividends are paid out of profits that have been taxed, whereas interest is paid out of profits that would have not been taxed. Hence, we end up bringing the after-tax cost of debt. How do you do that? You also be given formulas right at the end of your exam paper, but what you need to keep in mind is the interest amount you would have calculated, you should always adjust it to tax by saying 1 minus t in brackets. Open bracket, 1 minus t, close bracket. That 1 minus t, your t, it will be your tax rate, which you should express as a decimal, and your tax rate is often 28%. In the country, in actual fact, our company tax is at 28%. So you end up saying 1 minus 0.28. And then also one that I've left under cost of equity. You can actually also have preference dividends. On your preference shares, you need to look at, are the preference shares redeemable or are they non-redeemable? If they are non-redeemable, you use the perpetuity concept that just say Kp is equal to D over P0. But if the preference shares are redeemable, you end up using the time value of money concept, which the formula they'll also give you in the exam. But you need to read, find out, is it redeemable? If it's redeemable, use your annuity concept, which is time value of money. You use your financial calculator. Future value, present value, PMTN, you'll be calculating I. But if they are non-redeemable, perpetuity concept, your KP, which is cost of preference shares, will be equal to D over P0. So you need to read, find out are they redeemable or non-redeemable. The same will go for your debt. Debt could be redeemable, it can also be non-redeemable. And the very same concept, just like what preference shares would do, you treat them. If debt is redeemable, you use the time value of money, which is your annuity concept. If they are non-redeemable, you then use your perpetuity concept. But don't forget, when you're doing the debt one, you always adjust your interest amount to tax by multiplying it by 1 minus t, where your t, it is your tax rate, which is 28% on average. Understanding the concept of weighted average cost of capital. Now, what we refer to as weighted average cost of capital, remember, I can have a company being funded by ordinary shares, preference shares, and also long-term loans. So I would have touched three different sources of capital. So the concept of work now, we want to find out what are these respective sources cost, and how much of these respective sources did they contribute towards the capital structure. For instance, let's say I've got debt and equity. Equity brought in 60%, debt brought in 40%. You end up bringing those weights as you calculate your weighted average cost of capital to say, what is the respective cost of ordinary shares? Of the total capital structure, how much is funded by ordinary shares? Then you express the weight in decimal. You do exactly the same for preference shares. What is the cost of our preference shares? It could have been the one of annuity concept or perpetuity concept. And then you've got your cost of our total capital structure. How much is funded by that preference shares? You get yourself the weight. So your weight is just a matter of saying, of the total, 20%, let's say I've got 100 Rand that I've raised, which is my capital structure. If ordinary shares brought in 50 Rands, what is the weight of ordinary shares? It would be 50 over the total capital structure of 100 Rand, meaning the weight would have been 0.50 or 50%. You do the same for other sources. Then you multiply these weights with the respective cost of capital of these three different sources, but you should do it respectively. You can't mix the cost of ordinary shares with the weight of preference shares. So you would say the weight of preference shares multiplied by the cost of preference shares to give you a weighted cost. You do the same for ordinary shares and also for debt. The total of those weighted elements separately, if you add those total, that should give you what you call the weighted average cost of capital. And this work is so important in business because if you don't manage that work very well, what will happen is your weighted average cost of capital, which is the cost of you sourcing funds, if it's way too high, for instance, if your work is at 20%, the weighted average cost of capital is 20%, what project will you be in a position to invest in to give you a rate that is more than 20%? There could be very few. So one needs to manage the weighted average cost of capital and to keep it at an optimum level, meaning you would want to have it as low as possible, which will give you chances of implementing projects moving into the future. The higher it becomes, the less chances of you implementing any project, because can you imagine if your weighted average cost of capital, let's say just for argument's sake, not in practice, it's 50%. It goes without saying whatever project that I need to invest in, it needs to give me more than 50% as a return, because the cost of such funding, those people would have gave us money as capital are requiring 50% as a return. So it will never make sense for me to go and implement a project that doesn't give me the weighted average cost of capital. Hence, it is of paramount importance to know that your weighted average cost of capital needs to be kept at a minimum level as possible so as to maximize shareholders' wealth. So this basically that will be your effects of work and of course on the investment decisions. What we refer by optimum capital structure of an organization, it is a situation where a company is in a position to keep their weighted average cost of capital at its minimum. So those are your outcomes. So I've got this question here that I would want to quickly discuss with you pertaining calculation of work. So I've got this question. It was from May 2015 exam. The reason I chose these, they are not on your e-learn. For the other ones that are on your e-learn, the three, they've got solutions there. You should be in a position to work them out and see how one would actually do that. So I've got the existing capital structure of a company called Wout Limited. You have got ordinary shares who contributed 50% of the total capital structure. Non-redeemable preference shares brought in 15%. And then debt also brought in 35%. If you add those weights, they will give you 100%. So those are your weights. Then I'll go on to notes now. Says the ordinary shares are currently trading at 46 Rand 45. A dividend of 80 cents per share has just been paid. So for now, you already know that this company is paying dividends. And the directors estimate that the dividend will increase by 8% each year in perpetuity. It goes without saying, remember I gave you two scenarios. You need to pick, is the company paying ordinary dividends or not? In this regard, it is. Are these dividends growing? Yes, they are growing at 8%. So what formula would you use? The dividend growth model. So you end up using the dividend growth model. So That is how one is actually going to calculate cost of ordinary shares. You use the dividend growth model. And then if you look at point 2, preference shares are trading at R2.75 and they've got a par value of R2.40. They've already stipulated on that table there that these preference shares, they were non-redeemable, meaning which formula would you use? The perpetuity formula, where you're just going to say my KP is equal to D over P0. And then number 3, the debentures have got a par value of 50 Rand, which is the nominal value. And they are currently trading at 45 Rand, P0. The debentures are redeemable at 55 Rand in 10 years' time, which is your future value. It goes without saying, since these debentures, which are a source of debt funding, are actually redeemable, you're actually supposed to use the annuity concept, which we refer to as your time value of money concept. The compound tax rate, it is 28%. Can you guys calculate the cost of these respective sources of capital? Let's see what you come out with. And remember, you've got these formulas of calculating cost of debt, cost of preference shares, and also cost of ordinary shares in your textbook. I'll make an indication of where these formulas are in your textbook, and then you'll be in a percent to work these ones out. So your formulas in your textbook, they are starting from page 344. They are starting on page 344. Cost of your ordinary shares if the dividends are growing. So that formula in your textbook, it's on page 345. Remember, we said these dividends are growing at 8%. So you need to use the formula that says KE is equal to D0 open bracket 1 plus G divided by P0 plus G. So you're using, when you're calculating cost of ordinary shares, use the formula on page 345, which they'll give you in the exam. And then when you're calculating cost of debentures that are redeemable, you're actually going to use the formula on page. Well, in actual fact, guys, we have got this page that summarizes all these concepts and the formulas. Go to page 351 in your textbook. Go to page 351 in your textbook. We have got all the formulas that you're supposed to do this calculation when you are calculating weighted average cost of capital. For ordinary shares, there are 2 of them. Preference shares, there are 2 of them. And also for debt, there are 2 of them. Can you calculate cost of ordinary shares? And then we'll move on to preference shares together. I'll give you 2 minutes. Let's calculate cost of ordinary shares and then we'll be able to move. Calculate cost of ordinary shares and then we'll be in a position to move. And you are using the dividend growth model there. That is the formula that you're using to calculate your cost of ordinary shares, which is the dividend growth model. Can you calculate the cost of that ordinary share there using the notes that are indicated on the slide? So I'll also be doing the same, but I want to give you some opportunity to be in a position to apply your mind, and then I'll be able to correct you. I'll be calculating it shortly, Sheridan. I actually want your colleagues also to do the calculation. Let's see where they are. Okay. You might choose to convert the rands to become cents or to convert the cents to become rands. What I prefer myself is to convert cents to become rands, but you need to have those two using the same unit of measurement. So you require those two to be using same unit of measurement. So it's either you convert all of them to become cents or all of them to become rands. One more minute to go. I've given you the formula there, guys. We need to engage. Sherrod, can you try that calculation again? And remember, you need to follow the BODMAS when you punch in those figures in. I'm glad you could see that it was incorrect. Recalculate it again. Let's see what you get. I actually finalized mine now. Uh, 1.94, not necessarily, guys. Can you retry it one more time and then I'll be in a position to move? Remember, when you're doing this calculation, you need to follow through BODMAS. You can't go and add before you do the multiplication or before you actually sort out the brackets. You need to follow through BODMAS. That's a mathematical expression. I'm waiting for one of you to get it right and then we'll move on. But we are in your last minute. The formula, it is on page 351. Rodney, you're saying your D0, open bracket, 1 plus G. Your D0 is the dividend. Your G is your growth rate. Close bracket, over P0, which is your market price per share, plus your G, which is your growth rate. That's basically how one is supposed to do the calculation. Anyway, let me put you to rest. That is how one would have calculated your cost of ordinary shares. 9.86 instead. Look at how I did my calculation there. Your D0, what was your dividend? And they said 80 cents. So 80 cents, if you express 80 cents in rands, it is 0.80. Open bracket, 1 plus G. Your G was growth rate. In this regard, your growth rate was 8%, which was 0.08. You close the bracket, divided by P0. Your P0 is your market price. And the question said the ordinary shares are currently trading, meaning that's the current market price, at 46 Rand 45, then plus your G, which was a growth rate 0.08. That's basically how one would have done the calculation of cost of ordinary shares. You guys follow? And when you're punching that in the calculator now, you follow through the BODMAS. You can't go and add before you would actually divide. Neither are you supposed to divide before you actually remove the brackets. So you need to do that calculation using a BODMAS. So we've calculated our cost of ordinary shares being 9.86%. I'll then move on to calculation of preference shares. Still, we are using the formulas on page 351. Yes, so it's either you stick to rands or you convert some of the rands to become what? Cents. You had 80 cents, which is 0.80 rands. Your 46 rands, you leave them exactly as they are. But if you wanted to change your rands to become cents, you multiply them by 100. They were going to be 4,645 cents instead. And then use 1 unit of measurement, and it should come good. I'll move on to cost of preference shares. They are already non-redeemable there. So if you look on page 351, we have got non-redeemable and redeemable. So the formula that one needs to use when you're calculating cost of preference shares, if they are redeemable, it is KP is equal to D over P0. D over P0. So if you look at this question that we have, what is our D? It is our dividend. But the dividend, we are not referring to the percentage, but rather we're referring to the amount. So our percentage of dividends, they are 11%. So you're going to say 11% multiplied by the dividend, the par value. So you say preference shares are trading at R2.75 and they've got a par value of R2.40. Only then would you then divide by the market price per share, and they have indicated that they are trading at R2.75. So you put your R2.75 as a denominator. That's how one was supposed to do this calculation. So let's punch those figures in, and then we'll be in a percent to get ourselves our cost of preference shares. So I'll do the brackets off first. 11% of R2.40, R2.40, I'll say R2.40. 11% expressed as a decimal times 0.11 to give you 0.264 divided by 2.75, then multiplied by 100. So you can have it expressed as a decimal. That was going to be your cost of preference shares, 9.6%. So I'm actually jotting this down. Remember, our cost of ordinary shares were 9.86. Our cost of preference shares are 9.6%. We then finally move on to the cost of ordinary share of debentures. The debentures have got a par value of 50 Rand and are currently trading at 45 Rand. The debentures are redeemable at 55 Rand in 10 years' time. So if you look at the formulas that we have under debt, it's either debt is redeemable or non-redeemable. In this regard, debt is redeemable. So you're supposed to use the annuity principles. So you would say my PV, present value, you will say negative. I'll read the question one more time. The debentures have got a par value of 50 Rand and are currently trading at 45 Rand. Your present value, it will be your market price per share, 45 Rand. So you say plus minus 45, and then you move on to future value. The question said they are going to be redeemed in 10 years' time at 55 Rand. So your future value becomes 55 Rand. Your N after 10 years. And they also made an indication about PMT. That's where the tricky is. We're calculating cost of debt. So your PMT, you would calculate it by saying, what is the percentage of interest? It's 10%. Multiply by, what is the par value of this debt? It is 50 Rand. Which will give you an amount, then you need to go and adjust that amount to tax. So you say 10% of the 50 rand will give you 5 rand. And then you adjust the 5 rand to tax 1 minus T, where they told us that the tax rate is 28%, 0.28%, which will give you the solution of your PMT being 5 rand times 0.72, 3 rand 60. So your present value plus minus 45 rand, your future value, where at the amount at which you're going to redeem this debt, it is 55 rand. After how long? 10 years. And then your PMT, you're going to say 10%, which is the interest rate percentage on debentures, multiplied by the par value, which were 50 rand. That was going to give you 5 rand. Then you adjust the 5 rand to tax, 1 minus T, of which our T was 28%. You express it as a decimal, 0.28. You should be able to get yourself your PMT being 3.60. What is it that we're calculating on our financial calculator? We are looking for I. Using your financial calculator, and you calculate your interest there, or your I. I've given you present value, the future value, and together with the PMT. On the PMT, you just put the result there, which is 3.60. Let's find out what is going to be your I there. So I'll do the calculation myself as well. So your present value, it is plus minus 45. So what you do is, before you do any financial calculation, clear the memory by saying second function cancel. It should tell you 1 payment per year. If ever your calculator is not on 1 payment per year, take it back to 1 payment per year by saying 1 second function PMT. Terry, let me quickly calculate it as well. So I've got 45 plus minus present value, 55 future value, 10 and 3.60 PMT. We are calculating I. That's very right, Terry and Sheridan. It is 9.43%. That will be your cost of your debt. We have already done the calculation of ordinary shares, preference shares, and we'll just calculate cost of debt, which is 9.43%. And then finally, what we then need to do is to calculate our work now. So remember, on the slide, I've got your weights. Cost of ordinary shares are weight of ordinary shares are 50%. And you have calculated cost of ordinary shares being 9.86. So you multiply those two, write the amount under the weighted cost. So I would say, on ordinary shares, I would say 50%, it is multiplied by, and I'll bring the 50%, the weight, expressed as a decimal, so I'll say 0.50, multiplied by the respective cost of ordinary shares, which we said is 9.86%. It will give you 0.5 multiplied by 9.86 to give you 4.93%. Pardon me, there is supposed to give you 4.93%. That was going to be the weighted cost of ordinary shares, 4.93%. So I'll write it down, 4.93%. I'll also do the calculation of preference shares. The weight of preference shares are 15%, which is 0.15, multiplied by the respective cost of preference shares. We calculated it as 9.6%, which will then give you 0.15 multiplied by 9.6 to give you 1.44%. And then you calculate your weighted cost of debentures, which are debt. The weight are 35%, 0.35, multiply by its respective cost. We got 9.43 just now. So you would say 0.35 multiplied by 9.43. That will give you 3.30 in short. So we have calculated our weighted cost of ordinary shares being 4.93, of preference shares being 1.44%, and also of debentures being 3.30%. The total of these weighted costs is what we refer to as our work. So your work was going to be equal to 4.93% plus the 1.44% plus the 3.30%. It was going to give you an overall result. The 4.93%, Terry, it was, remember our weight of ordinary shares, they were 50%. So you say 0.50, remember 50% expressed as a decimal, it's 0.50, times the respective cost of ordinary shares, which was 9.86. That will give you 4.93. Well, yes, ignore the 4. In actual fact, it was a typo. It is the 4.93 instead. Yes, you can actually use, in actual fact, that's the perfect way. Calculate your work in the table format, and they always give you. If they don't give you, what one can then do is, you can just go and say, your sources, ordinary shares, preference shares, debt, what are their weights? Bring the second column as the weights. The third column, bring the weighted cost, sorry, the cost, and then the last column, bring your weighted cost, where I'll be having the 4.93 and the 1.44 together, the 3.30. That was going to give you 4.93 plus 1.44 plus 3.30. I was going to give you an overall weighted cost of 9.67%. So that was going to be your work. Like Grisane has asked, can you put this in the table format? Yes. Your first column should be the source, ordinary shares, preference shares, and debentures. You bring the weights, the 50% being 0.50, 15% being 0.15, 35% being 0.35. You bring the respective cost, which we calculated separately. Our cost of ordinary shares were 9.86, cost of preference shares were 9.6, and cost of debentures they were 9.43. You then multiply the weights multiplied by the respective cost to give you your weighted cost, which were the 4.93 ordinary shares, 1.44 for preference shares, and 3.30 for debt. The total of the weighted cost was going to be 9.67, which we refer to as our work. You guys with me on this weighted average cost of capital? Guaranteed to be having 20 marks in the exam. All the change, it is the names and the capital structure or the figures. But the concept still remains exactly the same. Is there someone with a question there, guys, before I move on to learn Unit 6? Anyone with a question before we move on to learn Unit 6? How we did calculate the respective cost of these sources together with the weighted average cost of capital. Oh, Chris is typing. Let's see what he has to say, and then we'll be in a position to move on. Yes, Chris, you know, I prefer you always show your workings. In case you end up making a typo or a mistake on your calculator, at least somebody will be in a position to follow through and see how you did your calculations. Even the formulas as well. As much as those formulas are given, rewrite them as you show your workings so that at least you could be sitting at 49%, who knows. By virtue of you putting your formula, also you end up making a mistake on a specific figure, you'll be in a position to fetch a mark there. So let's make it as a matter of principle. Show all your working and also the formulas as well. You can rewrite them as much as they are already given in the question paper. So, Select, we are using the HP102 Plus financial calculator. This is the financial calculator that is prescribed for this module, the HP10B2 Plus. But if in a case where you have got one of your own, make sure you understand it well and also show how you would have arrived at your workings. But the one prescribed for the module, indicated in the textbook and also in the learner guide, it is the HP102B Plus. Okay, so that is your learning unit 5. We then move on to learning unit 6. It is long-term investment decisions. Learning unit 6, it is your long-term investment decisions. They want you to be able to discuss, these are the outcomes as per the learner guide. Discuss basic capital budgeting concepts and understand their importance in decision making. Calculate and evaluate investment using these 4 respective concepts. So let's just have a quick overview of what is it that we refer to as capital budgeting techniques. Your capital budgeting techniques, in short, we want to make a decision. Remember, companies are always limited when it comes to financial resources. Not only financial resources, but resources are always scarce to companies that are profit motivated. Me and you know that government departments and municipalities, sometimes they might not be having limited capital because they are run by politicians and they always get our taxes from SARS. So the companies that we're talking around here, they're companies that are profit motivated. There is always a limitation to available resources, hence we speak of scarcity. So that said, whenever companies have got limited resources, they want to choose which specific projects or investments should we invest in so that we'll be in a position to maximize shareholders' value. So we are going to be looking at these 4 concepts: payback method concept, discounted payback method, net present value NPV, and the internal rate of return, looking at the decision criteria and also how one will be in a position to make a conclusion whenever you need to appraise projects or investments. So I'll start by talking around the theory on payback period method. Your payback period method, the concept or the decision criteria around it, you accept a project that pays the initial outlay the earliest or the quickest. So if you have got 2 projects, the one that pays how much you have invested in the earliest, it is the one that you will pick. That's the concept of payback method. But then me and you can imagine the weaknesses and shortcomings that that concept has, because it will be taking absolute figures exactly as they are, but me and you understand the concept of time value of money. So you can't expect 20,000 you are expecting to receive in 5 years to be equivalent to 20,000 today. So 2 of the main setbacks that the payback concept has, it completely ignores the concept of time value of money. That's one. And it also ignores any other cash flows that will come after the payback period itself. So that's basically your payback period. You accept a project that will pay the initial outlay the earliest or the quickest. I'll then move on to the discounted payback method. Your discounted payback method, it was trying to find a solution to one of the weaknesses that payback method has, which is the one that ignores the concept of time value of money. So your discounted payback method, what it does, instead of you using the absolute expected figures given, you need to discount those cash flows first to today, meaning you calculate the present value of a cash flow in year 1, bring it back by 1 year. The one that you're expecting in 2 years' time, bring it back by 2 years. The one you're expecting in 3 years' time, bring it back by 3 years, so that you get its respective present value. So that's basically your discounted payback method, to say discount those cash flows first today, and then the calculation then remains exactly the same as your payback period, but what you need to do first is to discount the future expected cash flows to the present value, and then use those figures to find out which project will pay the initial outlay the earliest. So that is the discounted payback method. Your net present value, we accept a project that is going to be having a positive NPV. So that is your first criteria when you are making decisions pertaining NPV. Accept a project that pays the initial outlay. You accept a project that has got a positive NPV. That's one. Meaning, if I've got both the projects giving me negative NPV, I'll reject both of them. What if you have got a scenario where both the two projects have got positive NPVs, meaning NPV is greater than 0? You then go and accept one with the highest NPV, provided the question has told you that these are mutually exclusive projects. You need to pick one of the two, not all of them. So those are your two decision criteria pertaining NPV. Pick the one that will give you the highest positive NPV, but still need to be positive first. And then moving on to internal rate of return. The decision criteria pertaining internal rate of return is you accept a project with an internal rate of return that is greater than WACC. Remember the weighted average cost of capital we just spoke of in line unit 5. So you would need a project that pays you a return more than the cost of how you would have raised the funds. So that is basically your decision criteria pertaining these four concepts. With that said, I've got this example here from May 2015 exam. I concerning myself with the calculation part. So I would actually want us to have a look at this calculation here. It says part B, marketing media, which is MM, has the option of expanding its operations, but can only spend 100,000 on initial resources. So they are limited pertaining the financial resources that they have. They can only spend 100,000. MM is faced with the following two mutually exclusive projects with similar risk characteristics. So what we refer by mutually exclusive projects, these are projects that by virtue of you picking one, you need to forego the other. You can't have both. Even if they are both acceptable, you need to pick one. So you can't be having both of them. So that's basically what you refer to as mutually exclusive projects. I'll read the scenario one more time. Marketing media, denoted by MM, has the option of expanding its operations, but can only spend 100,000 on initial resources, meaning they are limited to 100,000. MM is faced with the following two mutually exclusive projects. They need to pick one of the two. They can't pick both of them. And they've got similar risk profiles. And here are the projects. Here are your projects, project A, project B. So if I can just interpret what project A, those figures will mean. It means you need to spend 100,000 to invest in project A now, which is year 0. After year 1, you're expecting to receive 20,000. After year 2, 35,000. After year 3, 40,000. After year 4, 70,000. After year 5, 80,000. So those are your figures that you're expecting to receive from project A to project B. I just wanted to tell you that the weighted average cost of capital for this company, it is 14%. So I'll move back to the slide with figures. Can you calculate the payback period for both project A? Rather, let's just stick to project A, because exactly what you do on project A, you do on project B. I will calculate project B. Let's start with payback method first, and then you guys are calculating payback method for project A. How is it now, Sherrod? Can you see? Is there someone who also have got a problem viewing the slide that I have there, the one that says year 0, 1, 2, 3, project A, and then project B? Should be visible, I suppose. Sherrod, can you confirm if you are in a position to see it now? Is that so? Okay, let me read out the figures. You can quickly jot them down. And the other guys, oh, maybe it is the signal. Oh, good. Oh, great stuff. It is visible. Great stuff. Maybe to Sherrod, at project A, your year 0 cash flow is 100,000, which is negative. Cash 1, so the cash flow in year 1 for project A is 20,000. Cash flow in year 2 for project A is 35,000. Cash flow in year 3, 40,000. Cash flow in year 4, 70,000. And cash flow in year 5, 80,000. I'll read those figures one more time. Project A, in year 0, you are spending 100,000, meaning it's in brackets, it's negative. Year 1, you're expecting to receive 20,000. Year 2, you're expecting to receive 35,000. Year 3, you're expecting to receive 40,000. Year 4, you're expecting to receive 70,000. And then year 5, you're expecting to receive 80,000. So those are the figures. To Sherrod, if you couldn't see them, can you calculate the payback period using the figures I just read out or the ones that are being shown on the slide? And you calculate the payback period first, and then we'll be in a position to move to the other 3 concepts. Can you calculate the payback period using for project A? Remember, the objective there is to calculate how long does it take one to recover the initial outlay from those cash flows I just read out, or the ones that are on the screen. How long will it take you to recover the 100,000 from the cash flows that are on the slide and also the one that I just read out now? And you can express your solution to 2 decimal places. That is right, guys. It is, Monique is 3.07. Remember, you would have said, rather, let me show you how one would actually conduct this computation. 0.7 years instead. You were going to say, remember, this project required us to invest 100,000. So after the first year, we would receive 20,000, meaning we still need to recover a balance of 80,000. Year 1 gone. And then after year 2, we're expecting 35,000, meaning I'll say 80,000 minus the 35,000. We'll still need to recover the 45,000. So year 2, full year 2 gone. Year 3, we're expecting to receive 40,000. So I'll say the 45 minus the 40. I'll then be left with 5,000. So you are going to have 3 full years plus the 5,000 which we still needed to recover the remainder over the next expected cash flow, which was year 4 of 70,000. So you would actually need to stipulate or specify there, Terry, to say it is 3.07 years, and you do the calculation just like how I've just indicated there. So that was going to be the payback for project A. You do exactly the same for project B. So using the payback method, one will then make a conclusion by picking the project that pays the initial outlay the earliest. So, for example, if you actually look at that project B there, you're going to expect to receive 50,000 in year 1, 50,000 in year 2, meaning project B was going to recover the initial outlay in exactly 2 years. So which project was one going to choose? Project B instead, because you would have recovered your initial outlay the earliest. So that is basically how one will calculate the payback period. I'll then move on to calculate the discounted payback period. It wasn't part of this question, just for you to be able to know in case you see it in the exam. So if you want to calculate the discounted payback period, we need to discount these cash flows. So I want to use project A as well. So you need to discount these cash flows. So the interpretation is, we still need to recover the 100,000, but we need to discount those cash flows to today. So this is what you do. You would have your year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. You need to discount those respective cash flows by bringing those figures back to today, which is the present value. So if you look at cash flow in year 1 for project A, it's 20,000. So you do this calculation using your financial calculator first to get yourself your discounted cash flows. So this is what you do. You would say 20,000. I'm expecting to receive it after 1 year, meaning it's in future. So it's 20,000 future value. I'm expecting to receive it in a year's time, 1N, and we said the weighted average cost of capital is 14. 14I, you calculate your present value, which is PV. So your 20,000 that you're expecting to receive in year 1, if you bring that figure back to today by calculating the present value on it, it was going to be 17,543.86. You do exactly the same for year 2. Year 2, so I'll clear the memory second function, cancel, and say, I'm expecting to receive 35,000 from this project in year 2. So I'll say 35,000 future value. I'm expecting to receive this amount in 2 years' time. 2. N, what is your I? 14 I, and we're calculating present value. It was going to give you 26,931.36. And then year 3, we're expecting to receive 40,000. So 40,000 is a future value because I'm expecting to receive it in year 3. So you say 40,000 future value. I'm expecting to receive it after 3 years. 3. And my interest, which is my I, is 14. What am I looking for? Present value. It was going to give you, let me recalculate that, 40,000 future value. 14I, 3N, we calculate in present value. 26,998.86. And I'll also move on to the one of year 4, 70,000. So I would say 70,000 future value. I'm expecting to receive it after how many years? 4 years. 4N. What is my interest? 14I. We're looking for present value. It was going to be 41,445.62. After you have done the calculation, you can also go ahead and do discount 80,000, bring it back to present value, just like what I've just done on the first 4 figures. So your trend, if I'm going to talk around this one more time on cash flow in year 1, you're expecting to receive 20,000 in year 1, meaning my 20,000 is a future value. I'll say 20,000 FV, future value. You're expecting to receive it after how long? 1 year. 1N. What is the interest rate? 14%. 14I. Calculate your present value. It was going to be 17,000 for 543,086 cents. You go ahead and do this discounting of future expected cash flows year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5. Thereafter, you go and do the calculation of payback period, just like what we have just done. But you will be using these discounted cash flows. Is that clear, guys? Do you follow how you do the discounted payback period? You discount these future expected cash flows back to time 0. Then you use those discounted cash flows to calculate your payback period. Are you guys with me on that part? I've seen that question coming. I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before last, where they asked you to calculate the discounted payback method. You discount these cash flows. By discounting, I mean bring them to today. So you're going to calculate your present value of those future cash flows. Then you perform your normal payback period, but using the discounted cash flows instead. You guys follow that part? Great stuff, Terry. And the other guys, I'll assume you follow exactly what I say. Great stuff. So that's basically how you then go and conduct your discounted payback period. Discount expected future cash flows first, then thereafter you do your normal payback period calculation, but using the discounted cash flows, not the cash flows that are given on the question. So that is basically your discounted payback period. The conclusion will also be the same: which one pays the initial outlay the earliest. So that is your discounted payback period. I'll then move on to NPV. Remember my interest there. Your interest, it is 14%. Your interest, it is 14%. Can you calculate the NPV and also calculate the internal rate of return for project A and project B? So use the interest of 14%. Those are your expected cash flows. Can you calculate NPV for project A? Calculate NPV for project A, and then we'll discuss shortly. Can you calculate NPV for project A, and then we'll be able to move shortly. So this is how you would input your first 3 cash flows. So you would say 100,000 plus minus CF0, 20,000 cash flow 1, 35,000 cash flow 2, and then cash flow 3 will be 40,000, cash flow 4 will be equal to 70,000, and then cash flow 5 will be equal to 80,000. That's how you'd input your figures. I'll quickly calculate Monique and then confirm. And of course, I said your I is equal to 14. We're looking for NPV. So I'll quickly also do the calculation. So second function cancel. I'll then say 100,000 plus minus CFJ, which is button number 3 on the 3rd row. 20,000 cash flow 1, 35,000 cash flow 2, 40,000 cash flow 3, 70,000 cash flow 4, 80,000 cash flow 5, 14, I, second function, NPV. I'm getting 54,469.20. Can you recalculate? That's right, Rodney. Remember, your cash flows in year 0 is negative. So don't put it as positive. You need to bring that figure as what? Is negative, because it is an outflow. And you recalculate that, Hussein, you say 100,000 plus minus, then you say CFJ, so that you'll be in a percent to get what? A negative cash flow. 20,000 CF1, 35 CF2, 40 CF3, 70 CF4, or great stuff, as long as you've been a percent to follow. So you say cash flow 5, it is 80,000. Thereafter, you put 14%, your I, which is your interest. Only then would you then say second function, NPV. So you don't raise the S cash flows to second function. You have your cash flows directly. Sharod, so you have your cash flows directly, exactly as they're given. 100,000 plus minus, CFJ. 20,000, CF1. 35,000, CF2. 40,000, CF3. 70,000, CF4. 80,000, CF5. After CF5, put your interest. Remember, which was your WACC? Which was your WACC? It says MM has got a WACC of 14%. So you put your WACC 14%, your I, second function, you look for your NPV. So just for you to save time in the exam, after you have done your NPV calculation, don't remove your solution from the screen. Just move to calculate the internal rate of return. So I'm actually going to retype to do this calculation one more time. 100,000 plus minus CFJ, 20,000. CF1, 35, CF2, 40,000, CF3, 70,000, CF4, 80,000, CF5, 14I, second function, NPV. So you're going to get yourself 54,469.20. You then just say second function, internal rate of return without recalculating it again. You're going to get yourself, that's right guys, well done, 30.15%. So your internal rate of return was going to be 30.15%. And don't forget to put the percentage, because it's a relative return. It needs to be expressed in percentage. So that's basically how one would conduct your capital appraisals. You do the same for project B. And remember, I'll quickly go through the decision criteria. When you're doing payback method, you pick the project that pays the initial outlay the earliest. If you do the discounted payback method, discount the future expected cash flows back to present value, then do the normal calculation of payback, but using the discounted cash flows, and then you pick the project that pays the initial outlay the earliest. On NPV, we only accept a project, like in this case, this project gave us 30.15%. You only accept a project that gives you a positive NPV. But if both the two were going to give you positive NPVs, you then pick the one with the highest positive NPV. On internal rate of return, remember we got 30.15. which is more than the 14%, which was our WACC. So we'll accept a project with an internal rate of return that is greater than WACC. But if both the projects are having a WACC that is greater than internal rate of return, that is greater than WACC, you end up picking the one with the highest. So on your comments, comment one by one. According to payback, I would have picked A, because it pays back the initial outlay the earliest. According to discounted payback method, I would have also picked A, because it pays back the initial outlay the earliest after discounting cash flows. NPV, I would have gone with project A because it has got the highest NPV, which is positive. And then according to internal rate of return, I'll pick project A because it is the highest. internal rate of return, which both of them would have been more than your work. And then you need to go and make a conclusion. We always base our final conclusion using the NPV. So you might have a scenario where internal rate of return and NPV are opposing each other. Project A, highest NPV. Project B, highest internal rate of return. We end up making a conclusion using the NPV, because NPV talks directly to the expected cash flows. That one will be discounted expected cash flows, which we use when we are valuing shares. So we end up using the weighted the NPV as our overriding, or the one that takes precedence when we go and make final conclusion. So that is basically your project appraisal, guys. Learning unit 6. If there are any questions, let me know. If there are not, I will be in a position to move just to quickly give an overview of learning unit 1, 2, and 3. So our main concern was 4, 5, and 6, which we never discussed. 1, 2, and 3, we had a discussion on them on the first online tutorial for the module, which you can always access on eLearn. So if there are no questions, I will be in a position to move on just to give an overview of the main aspects on Unit 1. On main aspects on Unit 1, you need to know what is it that we refer to as shareholders' wealth. It is the value of shareholders indicated on the market price of the shares and also on the dividends that a company is expecting to receive. Your agency theory and also your stakeholder theory. Agency theory talks around managers being agencies of the owners of the business that are given a mandate to go and execute so as to make shareholders wealthier. Stakeholder theory now, it comes when one is implementing or when one is running an organization. You're not only supposed to concentrate on the primary objective, which is maximizing shareholders' wealth, but as you do so, you're also not supposed to be infringing other stakeholders to the business. So as you run a business, you're not supposed to go, let's say you are in the mining industry, you go and mine, like what happened, was it in Benoni or Brakpan, where some company way back, it was doing its mining there, and then they left some shafts not closed. It's unfortunate, some kid, some 3-4 months back, end up falling in the mining shaft. They couldn't retrieve the kid. They had to, in actual fact, the kid died indoors. If such a company was still trading on the stock exchange and that has happened, it goes without saying the share price of a company that would have engaged in such unscrupulous dealings, or rather unscrupulous way of doing business, you would have not upheld regulations or actually following through the rules that one is supposed to conduct when you're in the mining industry. The share price of that company was going to nosedive. So that's basically the importance of stakeholder theory, to say as much as we want to make shareholders' wealth to increase or to have it maximized, we should keep in mind there are other stakeholders to the business, which could be government, departments, your clients, the community, which is the public, employees, and so forth. So as you aim to achieve the objectives, which is the primary one, of maximizing shareholders' wealth, one still needs to keep in mind there are other stakeholders involved, and you're not supposed to be infringing those so as to maximize shareholders' wealth. On corporate governance, we'll be looking at the structures on how a company is being run, and also delegation of duties. So responsibility should come with accountability, and you can't be having one person involved in the procurement, also involved in the collection and payments. So you would have to uphold corporate governance, which Basel Code 3 also talks around, to say one of the reasons why we had in 2008 global financial crisis, it was because people were not upholding good corporate governance. And then also one needs to look at your elementary risk. Elementary risk, we say there are only two certainties in life, which are death and taxes. So it goes without saying, as business conducts its operations, one way or another, we'll be taking risk. Just that the risk we take in business, it needs to be calculated, and we'll be expecting to get a more than proportionate return on our investments, as much as we know we're actually assuming risk. So those are some of the main elements that one needs to know on Learning Unit 1. And then Learning Unit 2, it was a time value of money concept. Time value of money concept says the worth of a rand today is more than the worth of a rand tomorrow. With that said, it goes without saying, 10 rand that one could be having today is not equivalent to 10 rand that somebody will have in future because of inflation, liquidity preference, and unexpected events that might happen in future. So that's the concept of time value of money. You need to be in a position to use a financial calculator as you get into this exam. Pay attention to the wording, more as the grammar when you're doing time value of money questions. If you see past tense, or rather, let me just say prepositions, you need to pay attention to the grammar because prepositions will give you an indication on what exactly the question requires you to do. Ordinary annuities are the ones that are in your in the syllabus. An annuity, by definition, these are series of equal payments coming through at the end of each interval, but the interval needs to be fixed for a given period in time. So the one that we are only going to be using, or rather the one that is in our syllabus, is ordinary annuities, where the interval or the payments will be coming through at the end of the period, not at the beginning of the period. So as you practice using your textbook, the textbook, remember it's a corporate finance textbook, it will also be mentioning annuity dues. So pay attention, the annuity dues are not in your syllabus. You can always have a look at that if you want to further understand some of these concepts. But if you're studying specifically for this module, let's concentrate on your ordinary annuity calculations only. And then it takes us to the mixed stream calculations. The mixed stream calculation is exactly what we're calculating on project A, where the interval still remains the same, but the amounts that we're expecting to receive are basically different. So those are what we refer to as mixed stream. So when you're doing time value of money, pay attention to, am I given a lump sum, meaning a future value or a present value? On annuities, have I been given a PMT or payment? Or is the question requiring me to calculate a payment? So the wording itself will tell you exactly what's going on. And then your mixed stream, it's what we're doing on NPV calculations for project A. So that is basically most important element that one needs to know from Learning Unit 2. And then Learning Unit 3, the main aspects, your ratio calculation and comments. They will give you formulas for ratios. Usually they give you 3 or 4 ratios in the exam with 10 marks. So they will give you the formulas. Of importance there is, one, to know how to interpret the ratios. And the ones that often come in the exam, remember we've got 6 types of ratios. The one that often comes in the exam are your turnover ratios, or your turnover times ratios, your liquidity ratios, and your solvency ratios. There is no need for one to claim the formulas of these ratios, but of importance, you need to know how to interpret. So I often say to my learners that you interpret a ratio from the denominator. And I usually use this example to say, if I've got 10 rands and I've got 2 kids and I want to share this 10 rand equally between these 2 kids, I should be getting 5 rand. I'll say 10 rand divided by 5. So what should be the interpretation of the 5 rand? You would interpret the 5 rand as each kid will get 5 rand from the distribution. So we always interpret ratios from the denominator, and it won't earn you a mark if you just say this ratio from year 2016 to 2017 has increased or decreased. Of importance is for you to know when you are preparing an income statement with balance sheet, what constitutes gross profit, just for argument's sake. You calculate gross profit by saying sales less cost of sales, that will give you gross profit. So when you are explaining why is it this ratio have improved or in actual fact it become worse, it is the components that makes your numerator or the components that makes your denominator. And you need to interpret your ratios using the categories of ratios, not individually as well. So you would use your numerator and the denominator to define or to explain or to interpret why a specific ratio has increased or why a specific ratio has improved. So of importance, what components are falling on my numerator and what components are falling on my denominator. And if a ratio has decreased, just for argument's sake, a ratio can decrease because of these three possible reasons. One, the denominator has increased or the numerator has decreased. So it's either the numerator decreased or the denominator has increased or both of them have shifted one direction. That's basically how a ratio would actually increase or decrease. But like I said, it will never earn you any marks if you say this specific ratio increased or decreased. Why is it decreased or why is it increased? Look at the component that makes the numerator and also look at the components that makes out your denominator. And that will then take me to the end of this exam preparation. Are there any specific questions, guys, pertaining what we've been looking at that I can address before I'll be able to wish you good luck? Any questions that you might want me to attend to before I wish you good luck? You're so welcome, Grizain. I'm glad this interaction has been helpful to you. So welcome. Welcome, Chris. So I wish you guys all the best. And remember, the last item that I was talking around, my pointers. Go through the assignment. Remember, the timelines are already given there. Welcome, guys. I wish you all the best. You need to look at all the outcomes. You're welcome, guys. I wish you all the best. And also practice the use of the financial calculator and be specific and go straight to the point whenever you're commenting your ratios. Yes, Terry, you need to practice it. Remember, you've got 3 exam papers together with guidelines that are on your e-learn. So you need to go through those. You should be